Hello, I'm true crime author Judith A. Yates, and this is my video series, Best True Crime. The doors have slammed shut behind you. The stench of human waste is making you want to retch. Cries of hopelessness and despair are filling the darkness. The year is 1805, and you've entered the Charleston jail in South Carolina. It's a man-made hell, and you're probably going to die here. But today, it's 2020, and I'm taking you on a tour. We're at the old Charleston jail on a beautiful day in South Carolina. Relax, have fun, and yes, you will be released afterward. The jail sits on 4 acres. Prior to the 1700s, this plot of land was a graveyard, and there are still a lot of bodies buried under the jail. It makes it a popular spot for ghost hunters who are seeking paranormal activity. Before it was reconstructed to be used as a jail, the building has been used as a workhouse for runaway slaves, a house for the poor, and a hospital for vagrants, paupers, and beggars. It's also been used as an asylum. Criminals have been always kept separated from the other people who were housed in the building. During the Civil War, it housed federal prisoners of war, about 600 of them at any given time. Now, the higher-ranking officers were housed inside of the jail, but the lower-ranking officers and the black soldiers were kept outside on the grounds. This means in any weather conditions. And conditions were deplorable. They were nasty. The food was always rancid. There was very little fresh water. And if a soldier was lucky, he could catch a rat or some mice or a handful of bugs for a meal.
Now, they do give tours in the day and in the nighttime, and they have some ghost tours as well. The jail was operational from 1802 up until 1939, and it housed some of Charleston's most infamous criminals. That includes a female serial killer. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But it is a very interesting building in the fact that it is definitely a jail, definitely old style with its turrets and its corners and its bars. This is not the kind of jail that people relaxed in, had feather pillows, 3 hots and a cot. This was a real jail. For example, there was an inmate that they called the Animal that walked around on all fours and made grunting sounds and animalistic sounds. So this was a place where inmates were definitely brutalized. Now, during this time period, women who were pregnant or women who had children and they were incarcerated in jail, they had to bring their children with them, and they cared for them behind bars.
Back in the day, looking into this window, you would have seen the office of the chaplain. You would also have seen a tiny single cell, and in this cell, you would have seen the executioner. The story is he was a raving alcoholic, and they kept him in this cell until he was sober enough to carry out executions. Inmates had no access to running water, electricity, medical care, or light. Like jails and prisons today, the biggest problem was overcrowding. For example, they would put 400 to 500 people stuffed into a cell built for 150. Most people died from disease and starvation, and these were not just inmates. You could be housed here because of the color of your skin, or because you were witness to a crime and held for detention until the trial. That's right, if you had witnessed a crime, before the trial, they would put you in detention so you would be sure and show up for the trial. People really had no rights inside this jail. And I say people because men, women, and children were housed in this prison and usually in the same cells. Adding to the filth, death, and disease, there were rats, mice, and so many bugs, they say it looked like the ground was constantly moving. And this place was odoriferous. History tells us that you could smell the old jail from a distance. Climbing these stairs, you would have entered the jail warden's home. These stairs were the only access to the warden's home, where he lived with his wife and numerous children, right next to death row. Can you imagine living in the midst of an overcrowded, unwashed, disease-ridden, rancid jail? Imagine in a Charleston, South Carolina summer. Imagine being invited over to a dinner at the warden's home. On death row by the warden's house was one of history's most notorious female criminals. Her name has been pronounced Lavinia and Lavinia. But before I tell you her story, I want to introduce you to my good friend and true crime author, Aleda Vaughn. She's written a true crime book about a case that landed a sports superstar behind bars.
Hello, Judith and everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Aleda Vaughn, and I'm coming to you from beautiful San Diego, California. I'm an attorney, true crime writer, and legal analyst of criminal cases. I attend criminal trials and write stories about what happened inside the courtroom in compelling and gripping cases. This past year, I attended the high-profile trial of former NFL star Kellen Winslow Jr. It was a trial that captured the nation, and especially the sports world, as the former star with fame, fortune, and a celebrated name stood accused of unbelievable crimes, multiple rapes, and other sex crimes. 5 women in total came forward, and he faced them all inside a San Diego courtroom that is just behind me. And the question in the trial became, were these terrible charges true?
Court TV and the Law and Crime Trial Network covered the entire trial, and I provided my insight and expertise on both networks. Following the trial, I wrote an Amazon ebook about the case, going behind the headlines to share the extraordinary details of what actually happened inside the courtroom. Judging Winslow Jr. from NFL star to serial rapist, inside the shocking rape trial of Kellen Boswell Winslow II is now available on Amazon and on my website, www.aledalaw.com.
I am now standing before the Pacific Ocean, which before Kellen Jr.'s arrest, he could view this very ocean from his home. At one time, he had it all. He was born into football royalty. His father was a football star and in the Hall of Fame. And Kellen Jr. also became a star, setting records, receiving prestigious honors, and reportedly over $40 million during his time in the NFL. He married his high school sweetheart, who was absolutely stunning, and he had 2 young children. His life seemed perfect. But was there another side to him? According to the 5 accusers, there was. And if they were to be believed, it was a dark, frightening side.
As the women testified, they would be forever known as Jane Does 1 through 5. Kellen Winslow Jr. faced 12 charges, holding the potential for a life sentence, kidnapping and rape of a 54-year-old hitchhiker, rape of a 59-year-old homeless woman he had befriended, rape of an unconscious 17-year-old when he was a college student, indecent exposure to a 57-year-old neighbor gardening in her front yard, and lewd acts before a 77-year-old woman at a gym. Ugly charges to be sure, but were they true? And how had it come to this?
So was Kellen Jr. a depraved sexual predator preying on the most vulnerable of women, as the prosecution contended? Or was consent freely given and claims fabricated by women seeking financial gain from a wealthy star, as the defense maintained? And was there overzealous law enforcement and nonstop media coverage that in some way contributed to false claims? You will find out the answers and more in my book as I take you inside the courtroom in this unbelievable and unforgettable trial. So once again, you can order my book. It's an Amazon ebook. This is the cover of it, off of Amazon itself or off of my website, www.aledalaw.com. So thank you so much for joining me. Please stay safe and healthy. I'm Aleda Vaughn, attorney, true crime writer, and legal analyst of criminal cases. Now back to you, Judith.
Through these gates passed Lavinia Fisher, who, they say, in the early 1800s, her and her husband John ran a boarding house just outside Charleston, where they were allegedly stopping travelers along the way, getting information from them if they had money on them or not, poisoning the travelers, and then taking their money. Depending on what you believe, legendary or not, this did occur or it didn't occur. It might have been the government was just after their land. However, Lavinia Fisher and John were housed in this jail.
Some historians and criminologists believe Lavinia Fisher was the first female serial killer in the United States. Others argue she was completely railroaded and swung from the gallows an innocent woman. Either way, she was not the first female serial killer, but it makes for a good ghost story. Legend has it the delicate hands of beautiful Lavinia served cups of poisoned oleander tea to wealthy travelers. Then they buried the bodies and kept whatever wealth the travelers happened to be carrying. Lavinia and John were arrested in 1819 and held here in the jail. Convicted of highway robbery, they were sentenced to hang. But on September 13th, they almost escaped. John slid down the rope fashioned from bed sheets, but as you can guess, the linens were so nasty that they didn't even hold. Poor Lavinia! She stood watching through the bars as John disappeared into the night. But John could not live without his lovely Lavinia, so he returned the next day. Here's the escape path. On February 4th, 1820, the Fishers' appeals were denied. They were going to die. February 18th, 1820, just past 2 p.m., John and Lavinia Fisher were hung in the gallows about 1 mile from the Charleston jail. Newspapers of the time reported both wore long white robes over their clothing, traditional of the condemned. Neither made statements. Over 2,000 spectators watched.
Thank you for taking this tour with us in the old Charleston jail in Charleston, South Carolina. This has been such a treat. It is history. It is criminal justice. It is true crime. And right now I'm standing in front of a window that is actually open, except of course for the original bars, surrounded by the original brickwork. It is amazing. You can actually smell the darkness and the dampness and the history coming through the air. And if you're a dark tourist like I am, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Through this window, we can see an old metal staircase going up, spiraling to someone's doom, someone's rest of their life, perhaps their death. It is just an amazing part of history, and I keep saying that just because it is. Words really can't describe it. Now, go online, and we're going to put the website down below. And please hit like, hit save, hit subscribe, because I'm going to be bringing a lot more great videos for you on my blog. We are called Best True Crime. I want you to definitely check out our other videos, because we're going to be bringing you a lot more interesting videos on our blog.
I'm true crime author Judith A. Yates. You've been listening to my video series, Best True Crime. Thanks for subscribing, and be safe out there.